Hey everybody, it's Jason Blaha here, and today I want to talk a little bit more about my favorite exercise, the deadlift. And I've had a couple different questions come up in the last week, actually repeatedly these same questions, so I thought I would go ahead and address both of them in the same video. So let me put on my +5 hat of weaponsmithing, work on skilling up my crafting a little bit, and let's talk about this. Alright guys, I've had people ask me about chalk for grip, because some people are saying, look, you're talking about ditching straps, working on your grip. Isn't chalk letting you cheat on your grip? If you use chalk, isn't your grip going to develop inefficiently and effectively? Isn't it going to cause you to have a weaker grip over time? And what about traps becoming imbalanced, or muscle imbalances in general, from using a mixed grip? Some people are saying, some other YouTubers are claiming they've had that problem also. I'm going to call bullshit on that one. But let's go ahead and jump into this. Alright, chalk. Does anyone know why you use chalk when you deadlift, when you pull, when you do all these exercises? I'm going to let people think about it for a minute. Anyone who doesn't pull with chalk, who trains heavy for any sort of long session, hands get sweaty. Hand sweat. Now, there's the obvious problem of the grip being slippery when your hands are sweaty, but let me ask you a question. If you were to grab something in any environment in the real world, if you're going to have to grab something and pull it, you're probably going to wipe your hands off first, right? Why? Because we instinctively know that sweaty hands can cause a problem. They can make things slippery. And also, even if you're training in the cold, what can happen with your hands? They don't have the same problems, but eventually when your body heat gets up, your gripping stuff, you can get sweat between your fingers and things. Alright, now the obvious problem there is that the bar can get sweaty. Not the bar, but your hands, and that can make it slippery. But what's the other issue with really wet hands that get saturated with sweat? It can cause the bar to slip in a way that can tear your hands easier. Anyone who's deadlifted heavy long enough has torn skin on their hands. They've ripped calluses off their hands. Right? We've all been there. We've all experienced this. The best way to reduce that is to keep your hands as dry as possible. And you can only dry them so much with cloth and everything, and sometimes they're going to get wet again faster. Chalk allows you to get your hands all chalked up. The chalk absorbs the moisture. It keeps them drier longer, meaning it's less of a hassle. You're not having to wipe your hands as much. Once you're chalked up, you can sometimes do 4 or 5 sets of whatever you're doing. It doesn't matter whether it's deadlifts, rows, chin-ups, anything else. You can keep your hands drier without having to try to keep re-wiping them and getting it out from between your fingers and everything. The chalk allows you to keep your hands drier. It's a safety issue. It's not just about grip strength. There is the fact that, yeah, your grip can become slippery. But the issue is, of course, damage to your hands. All right, ripping a hand is a lot easier with wet hands. This is just a safety precaution. It helps keep you from ripping your skin, ripping your calluses, because that stuff will take you out of pulling for a little while too. Anyone who's ever seriously ripped a callus, like if you guys remember that last big meet I did, I tore my hand, I split my hand. All right, I couldn't pull for a week after that without it hurting. And of course, I had to go ahead and lift with a torn hand. I did all 3 of my deadlifts with a torn hand in that meet. But that was okay. I took my medal, got invited to Worlds, and that was my last powerlifting meet. I was done. I decided to go ahead and just call it quits. I proved what I needed to prove to myself at that point. But after that, my hand hurt. I didn't pull anything for a week until it healed. No rows, no chin-ups, nothing. So, I mean, tearing your hands can be a problem. That's why we use chalk, is to protect the skin, to keep it dry so that the bar doesn't slip in a way that causes it to rip and fold and tear calluses. It's that simple. Now, as far as muscle imbalances from the mixed grip, why do we use the mixed grip? Anyone know? Because it keeps the bar from rolling. It gives you the best possible grip strength on a heavy deadlift because it prevents bar roll, because you're counterbalancing, you're putting equal force on each side. If you double overhand, the bar can tend to roll this way. People who do even rows or whatever underhand grip, what happens? People who do those Yates rows, the bar can roll the other way easier because that's the direction of your grip. When you run the mixed grip, it reduces the chance of the bar rolling. Now, there's always concerns about muscle imbalances, but I want people to think about this. They always worry about their traps. I pull only mixed grip because of an old bicep injury. You guys can see my scar there. From 2004, so that's 13 years ago. I think I had 605 on the bar for work sets when I had that problem. My own fault, I'm not going to get into what caused that. It was a lot of factors compounding up. Bicep tears don't happen just because. You usually have to be doing a couple different things wrong over time stupidly before you tear a bicep. My own stupidity, you live and you learn. But because of that old injury, I always overhand the left side and I always underhand the right. I even warm up that way. Not that I really warm up. For me, a warm up is usually a couple reps of 315 or 405. That's how I warm up, and I go to work sets. But even my warm ups are the exact same grip. I don't have a trap imbalance. Not that I have particularly massive upper traps, but I can see my middle and lower traps and everything in the mirror. I don't have any imbalance going on. But here's the thing. When you think about it, any muscle imbalances there are most likely going to be in the arms. Now, if you're not doing any other work for your biceps but the deadlift, the supinated hand versus the pronated hand, the one that you underhand grip, you're probably going to end up with a slightly bigger bicep because it puts more pulling tension on it. If you don't do any curls, any chin-ups, any rows. If that's the only stimulator of your bicep, you're probably going to get a slight bicep imbalance. A lot of people don't know that. What, the deadlift can build the bicep? Of course it can. You guys ever look at any of these studies on young high school football players? Ooh, they don't have them do any real upper body work yet? Yeah, squats and deadlifts, their biceps grow. And it's because of the deadlift's pulling on it. I'm not saying it's a great stimulator. Same thing, you might see some imbalance in your forearms. But as far as traps go, the traps are still pulling down. Right? Think about that. The traps are pulling down. Do you really think there's a significant difference in that? There really isn't. It's very, very minor. Maybe a few percent at most more tension on one side. All right, a few percent at most. But here's the thing that I would ask you. Who out there isn't doing other compound movements? Again, if the deadlift was the only exercise you're doing for your traps, maybe you would develop a small imbalance. But ultimately, everything's about the different muscles through the body. You have to have a pretty significant imbalance before it becomes measurable, meaning usually people's imbalances are from bad shifting on their grinders on pressing and things. But for your traps, let's say that someone just follows a very, very basic program and they only do 5 exercises, right? Let's say they squat, bench press, deadlift, row, and overhead press. How many of those work the traps heavily? Half of them. Deadlift's not your only exercise you're doing for your traps. How about your rows? Rows and overhead pressing work the traps just as much as the deadlift do. Now they work different parts of the traps more. And here's the thing. The upper traps get worked more on those other exercises than they do on the deadlift, particularly the overhead press. In fact, anyone ever look at any of the EMG work that Brett Contreras did? The upper traps got just as activated by lateral raises and overhead pressing in his shoulder research than they got from some of the pulling. Now the middle trap and the lower trap, they get worked a lot more, and there is something to be said for the fact that working any part of a muscle will cause some growth and stimulation in other parts of the muscle. That's what people need to understand when we get into all these different exercises. Oh, this works this part of the muscle. Yeah, but it's not saying it doesn't cause the other part to grow. It just might be slightly less. There is that radiant effect all the way through the muscle. That's just reality. All right, that's the reality of muscle growth and training. But here's the thing. If you're getting a balanced amount of work from your overhead pressing and your rowing and you're doing sufficient enough volumes of those, are you really going to see that big of an imbalance from the deadlift? Probably not. Furthermore, when it comes to actual volume done, the deadlift is very, very taxing. Not many people out there can do the amount of volume on their deadlift that they're going to do on a row or an overhead press, right? It's just harder to recover from. It's one of the hardest exercises to recover from. So truth be told, most of your total reps for the week are probably going to be coming from your overhead work, your rowing, your pull-ups, your chin, all your shoulder and other shoulder and back work that traps to a tremendous extent. Most people aren't doing very high volumes of deadlifts. For example, for me, it's not uncommon for me right now to do 15 sets of push press a week, right? It's not uncommon for me to do 10 sets of rows, and I do a lot of chin-ups. I only do 8 sets of deadlifts, 7 or 8 sets of deadlifts right now. That's what I do per week. And sometimes I don't even do those every single week. Like the last 2 weeks, because of the spacing of my workout of being able to get over to my favorite deadlifting gym, where I've got a good platform, I ended up going 8 days between deadlift sessions. Now, I'm really big on high frequency deadlifting, but for me, deadlift is taking a secondary role. I'm working a lot more on push pressings, cleans, things like that. So by that same token, I'm easily doing almost maybe double the amount of overhead pressing and more rowing and chin-ups and everything per week that I'm doing deadlifts. And that's pretty normal for most people. It's not uncommon for people to be doing 50 to 100% more total reps on their overhead work or their rows than they are on their deadlift. So accordingly, even if the deadlift is giving a slightly imbalanced stimulation all through the upper back from the mixed grip, if you do it the same way every time, some people switch it, in which case there would be none at all. But you're talking about overall volume for the week. Most people are simply doing way more volume on the totally balanced exercises for their upper back, middle back, traps, everything else than they are deadlifting. So that's going to overshadow any minor imbalance that you're going to get from that. So people who are claiming they're getting an imbalance from that, it's not your mixed grip on your deadlift causing an imbalance. There's something else going on with it. Other things you're doing wrong, most likely, or it's just all in your head, or the fact that most people, no matter what you do, will have one side slightly bigger than the other. That's reality. That's the real world. If you think that you're going to be some perfectly sculpted, symmetrical thing, best of luck to you. That's how 99% of people can't really pull that off, not where it's perfectly balanced. That's just not the way the human body responds. You always have a dominant side. Alright guys, but that's really all I have to say on that today. I hope it's been informative, and I will talk to you guys next time.